When I think about AAA FPS games, I think of a few big titles, and you probably thought of the same ones, or at least around this. Those would include things like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Halo, and they're pretty much the ones that most people will automatically think about. There are tons of shooter games out there, but these three have been dominating in the FPS field for ages. However, it seems like there's been a shift since the early 2000s when these games were at their peak. We often look back with fondness on the older installments in each of the series, and we think they were really the golden age of each respective game. Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 2 from 2009, and Call of Duty World at War, to name a few, are often the most highly regarded. Battlefield 3, Battlefield Bad Company, Battlefield 4 are often highly regarded, Halo CE, Halo 3, Halo 2, I could go on listing games, but you get the point. Now take a look at the last few years and you see that Halo Infinite was not really all that successful. Battlefield 5 and 2042 were major misses for the Battlefield franchise. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019, Black Ops Cold War Vanguard, and Modern Warfare 2 2022 have all been hit by intense scrutiny. Now Call of Duty is in a unique position in that its fans are very dedicated, but still, is it really that popular anymore? Is Call of Duty the same game it was back in the early 2000s? Case in point, is the AAA industry losing its grip on the world of FPS games? Are people going to start looking elsewhere? Are FPS games in general from AAA companies falling down, and are people going towards different types of games? Let's take a look at this topic a bit further. Nowadays, first-person shooters made by big AAA companies have been riddled with tons of issues. From broken and buggy launches to overstuffed microtransaction models and wavering player counts, something is clearly amiss in the FPS world. Back in January, it was basically announced that Warzone 2.0, the revamped version of Call of Duty Warzone that was made for Modern Warfare 2, was losing players in higher numbers than expected. Despite the fact that MW2 2022 was the fastest selling Call of Duty game, you'd think Warzone 2.0 would follow suit. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. If you follow many Call of Duty YouTubers, you'll find that some of them may be experiencing less than ideal numbers on their videos about Modern Warfare 2, but maybe seeing better view counts on even Modern Warfare 2019 gameplay. It's honestly pretty jarring to realize, but a similar issue occurred with Vanguard and Black Ops Cold War 2, and in fact, so many Call of Duty YouTubers were making content about Modern Warfare 2019 gameplay through Black Ops Cold War and through Vanguard's release. Halo Infinite is probably the biggest topic for this video because Halo Infinite took a massive nosedive that I don't think many people anticipated when it first released, but it was a really dramatic fall from grace. Halo Infinite seemed to be doing something right when it launched. It had a strong player count, it was bringing people back to the franchise, and it was reeling in new players with its free-to-play model. And then the issues started to arise. It was not producing enough content in the right time frame despite its free live service model. Fans were angered at the microtransactions and customization system, which they felt was miles away from the things we saw in older Halo titles and Halo Master Chief Collection. Halo Infinite saw an all-time peak of a little over 270,000 players on Steam. However, that player count has practically plummeted. It struggles to hit 10,000 players nowadays, which is pretty tragic considering the fact that Halo Infinite was hyped up a lot when it released. Again, though, this does not include Xbox numbers, only Steam numbers. Halo Infinite even seemed like it was a tale of redemption. When the game was first revealed, people were very angry at the design and the state it was in. Halo Infinite was delayed and then was technically fixed, yet when it launched, people just didn't stick much with the campaign. People didn't stick around much for the multiplayer either. Mind you, Halo is the face of Xbox. Halo is basically a pioneer in the FPS genre. Halo is a major name. It's not some niche franchise that a few people played at one point in 2007. Halo is massive. For Halo to be seeing such abysmally low numbers indicates that something is egregiously wrong here. Halo Infinite suffered from so many issues, and it clearly wasn't able to pick up the speed it once had. Despite Halo being such a massive franchise, it unfortunately feels like it's dying out slowly every day. Taking a look at Battlefield, we can see almost the same thing happening there. Battlefield 1 was considered such a powerful and important entry to the Battlefield franchise. It brought something fairly new to the AAA world in that it defined itself properly. Battlefield 1's trailer is one of the most highly regarded trailers out there, and it launched during a time where its competition was Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, which I'm sure everybody knows about by now and why that game was such a big miss for the COD franchise. However, Battlefield 5 seemed to be the beginning of the fall of Battlefield from grace, and Battlefield 2042 almost destroyed it. Battlefield does have a chance to come back, but with the disastrous release of 2042, it might take a long time for trust to be rebuilt between the fans and the series. Battlefield 2042 launched in a very messy state, and changed much of what many fans liked about the Battlefield series. With a lack of content for quite some time, the player base dropped relatively quickly. Worst of all, the reputation of 2042 is very much damaged. It would take quite a lot of convincing to show players that it's worth sinking several hours into. And that's obviously not something you'd want for a live service game. But really, what we're seeing is something dramatic. The world of AAA FPS games is changing. The once very dominant giants of the industry are struggling to keep players roped in as more and more games release and take attention away. In such a competitive industry like the gaming industry, it's genuinely difficult to compete at a mass scale. It's an industry that would be considered to have tons of competition and alternatives in, which means that each new entry to the industry must have a very strong level of value added and differentiation so that players don't leave or skip the game out entirely. But when we look at the facts, why did a game like Elden Ring do so well? It was projected for quite a while that Elden Ring would overtake MW2 in sales. Now, although it didn't, it certainly trumped MW2 in terms of reviews, and was even Game of the Year back in 2022. But why? Why would people suddenly be so interested in a Soulsborne game in such a massive sweep like this? People who had never played Dark Souls flocked to Elden Ring. Why? Well, Elden Ring provided something appealing to wide audiences. It provided a fantasy game set in the universe of The Lord of the Rings. It provided an open world. It gave disenfranchised players a game that was ready at release. That's not something MW2 can attest to, unfortunately, which has been plagued by bugs and issues since it first launched. I discussed this some time ago, but MW2 actually had an issue where players were being falsely banned left and right for absolutely no reason. Call of Duty has drifted so far from what most players want, and despite high sales figures, MW2 has not been a very well-regarded Call of Duty title. It's not considered one of the best of all time. A few months later, it's just relatively muted. But everyone still talks about games like Elden Ring. Are AAA FPS games dying out? Is the golden age over? I don't think they're dying out necessarily, but I do think the golden age has passed. These AAA companies once produced games with heart and soul and seemed to genuinely care about the products. Now they care about profits, but that's not really working out for them either. EA basically admitted Battlefield 2042 was a monetary flop, but they blamed mostly COVID-19 instead of, well, the fact that the game was a mess at launch. Halo Infinite has been hit hard by a lack of players despite being free to play. Call of Duty is really, I could say, the only exception to this on the list, but its player base is tiring out too. Many feel that all Call of Duty cares about is selling skins nowadays, and I mean, look at how many cosmetics a game like Call of Duty provides constantly, while its base game remains pretty broken. So many glitches, like for example, the most prominent one that I dealt with was the Battle Pass glitch, where it didn't show you how many tokens you had, and that only got patched, I think, with the release of Season 2. That's when it got fixed for me anyways, and it was so annoying to contend with. And that's just one example of many issues with the recent Call of Duty title. It's actually quite a small example. I think people are more and more realizing the value that story-driven games are offering, and that people are more and more realizing that dropping $70 on a multiplayer game and then even more on microtransactions just doesn't make much sense anymore. I think we're seeing some sort of a shift from the world of FPS games, and more people are embracing the idea of trying out different games. I don't necessarily think that AAA FPS games are dying, but they soon will be if the companies making them continue this streak of producing poorly developed games. I think Microsoft, Activision, and EA really need to wake up and understand that producing broken games and barely offering anything new every year is the definition of insanity, and that this system will eventually falter in favor of something new. Because at the end of the day, as a consumer, why should I spend my money on a broken game when there are polished ones out there for me to buy as well? But then again, is it that the player base is shifting? Are the older players who once enjoyed Black Ops 2 the ones who are changing and not the games? Because the success of each Call of Duty title in sales has to mean something, right? It does. Although Halo and Battlefield have been suffering lately in terms of success, Call of Duty isn't. It seems to be one of the most enduring games ever, and it really has to do with things like marketing and the player base. Sure, Call of Duty appeals to all audiences, but many younger people have lots of time to play the game, so they do. And so I guess we can say that perhaps people of our age, those now in their 20s and up, are really just not able to enjoy these types of games the same way we used to. Maybe AAA FPS gaming is dying for those of us who grew up on it, and with a new generation of players, it will find its new audience. It's a complicated subject, but I think what separates Call of Duty from the rest is that Call of Duty came up with a simple, repetitive formula for its gameplay, reiterated it each year, marketed it like crazy, brought in tons of money, and continued to do the same thing year after year. And it appeals to new people every year because everybody knows what Call of Duty is. So the next person to get a new console is going to go for Call of Duty because that's one of the first titles you hear about. But Halo is an Xbox and PC exclusive. Battlefield was not nearly strong enough to ever kill Call of Duty. Their audiences will never be the same. So is Call of Duty going to be the last one standing in the world of AAA FPS games? I mean, it will eventually fall, but that time is probably not anytime soon. Let me know in the comments what you think, and with that being said, thanks for tuning into DZSH Gaming. If you enjoyed that video, feel free to subscribe with notifications set to all so you never miss out on a single upload. Leave a like and comment below, and be sure to check out our website for gaming news, entertainment, and more. The links to everything are, as always, in the description below.